Welcome to the Builders Podcast, Episode 76, Genesis Amaris Kemp. Her story, a discussion about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Before we jump into this episode, please subscribe to this podcast if you love business and real stories from the trenches. And after a listen, please give us a thumbs up, like, and share if we've earned it. Hit that notification bell too if you're on YouTube so you don't miss each episode. With your help, we can reach more people and deliver these valuable From the Trenches lessons to those that need it. Enjoy the episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another The Builders. Today, we are here with Genesis Amaris Kemp. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Matt.
Good to have you. So, Genesis is, what are you, a visionary life coach? An author?
Yes.
Motivational speaker? Am I leaving anything out?
A podcaster. I have my own podcast show.
That's right. Yeah, and I'm going to actually hopefully be on that soon, too. We're going to share.
Yes.
All right. So, as we do on The Builders, the first time we have somebody on, we love to hear about their story, their journey, how they've arrived at this beautiful place they are right now, to become this awesome person they are. And and what that entrepreneurial journey is, how you ended up working for yourself, doing your business, becoming a coach, and all that good stuff in this case. So with that, let's have you start telling your story. And this can be as you can have the medium version, the short version, a long version, whatever you think, whatever contributes to the end result.
So I like to say that my journey has been definitely a roller coaster ride with the highs and the lows, but it's in each one of those, the highs and the lows, that actually helped me develop personally and professionally. Because if we never talk about the struggles that we face in life, then it doesn't carry weight for the successes or the wins that we have. So I'll start with, my recent journey. So I spent 15 years in corporate America as a whole. 12 of them were spent primarily in the oil and gas and energy sector, where I, started in oil and gas in high school. But leading up to that, my first job out of high school was working in real estate, because I did not want that typical fast food job. I was like, no ham, no cheese, no turkey. I don't want someone to throw fries at me. The customers are not always right. And I just seen disgruntled customers be so disrespectful to people that are serving them. And I was like, back then, I say Genesis BC, before Christ, I would have got I would have got a little nasty with you, especially if it was, not conducive, before the Lord found me. And so I worked for Remax Preferred Homes as a personal assistant, and that was amazing. And I tell people I was young and naive, and had I known what I know now, I would have actually took them up on getting a real estate license, because that would actually come in handy for some of the things that I would like to do, now. Then my second job, still in high school, because I did it via a co-op program, because I had all these high school credits. I just didn't want to graduate early because I wanted to graduate with my friends, was working at the cancer center. And that was like my aha moment, because growing up as a kid, I always wanted to be a pediatrician. So just getting a job in the medical field, I was like, this is amazing. It's helping people. But whenever you're working at the cancer center, it does become taxing in a sense, because I am very lovable. So whenever I was working there, I got to see some of the patients on a daily basis, whether they were doing chemo or radiation. And when you meet somebody and you see them on a daily basis, you build a bond. And if something were to happen to that patient, you feel sad. So it's almost like when people say I'm an empath, you feel for that person because you've already built that rapport and relationship. Then from there, that's when I got laid off. And since I mentioned I was in a co-op program, I had to find another job in order to, meet the requirements of this class, because not only was it a class I was taking, but I was also getting paid. So it was a win-win. And that's when I went to my teacher and I was like, Miss Horner, They just told me that I was going to be laid off because there was a new hospital that had opened up that had, state-of-the-art equipment. And, some of our patients went there. And it's no discount or discredit for the patients. You want new and advanced technology to help you get through. So she's like, okay, well, let's go back to the drawing board. Then she came to me and she's like, oh, here's a company and I was like, oil and gas? I was like, didn't I tell you my plan was to go to medical school? Like, how is this going to help me? But, hindsight 2020, you never know why things happen to you until you realize that they happen for you to learn and grow and develop. So that's when I landed in oil and gas, and it was a small mom and pop company. It was a corrosion company, and the owners were British. And when I got the assignment, I want you to guess what that assignment was, Matt. I want to see if you get it right. What's an entry level assignment?
Pulling gas and oil out of the ground. I don't know.
No, that was probably an advanced one. So. It was to be an imaging clerk, and I was like, an imaging clerk, and like my facial expressions. And when I read the description, I was like, oh, okay, this sounds easy peasy. Then when I got there, it was like literally scanning papers all day long. That is so tedious and boring. So I remembered doing that job, and one day, I guess it was so boring, I fell asleep. And y'all, don't laugh, but I always say it's the back end stories that build up to the successes. I was like, just, and I remember someone tapping me on my shoulder saying, you can't do that. And that was my first boss. But the way God works is just amazing. I'm religious and spiritual. Her and I are really good friends till this day. And we actually built a rapport, and I found out later on why she gravitated to me. So that's going to come later in the story. So fast forwarding, I then realized in that moment that I wasn't cut out to be an imaging clerk. One, it was boring. I don't want to scan papers all day long. And I was like, I'm smart. I'm intelligent. I have intellectual abilities. I need to do something else. So then I use this mind up here to help be a conduit of where I wanted to go. So I was like, you know what? It's not about who you know, but it's about who knows you, who can vouch for you in rooms that you can't go into. So I started to network internally within the company. Then I moved into project management, so working with the project managers that were doing a lot of work with the offshore engineers and etc. Then from there, my big break came where I became involved in HSE, which is health, safety, and environmental. Then from there, that same boss that tapped me when I fell asleep, she decided to leave the company to go work for a Fortune 500 company because she was there for over 14 years. And since her and I worked together in the HSE department, we built the safety program from the ground up. So who's next in line to get the manager position? Me. So they gave me the manager position. And by that point, y'all, I'm telling you, I'm still in high school. So to be a manager in high school, getting ready to graduate.
You're still in high school. Wow.
Yeah, this is still in high school. So, and I'm just getting close to my graduation. So I had this big assignment working with a lot of people, but you have to have the determination, the drive, and the consistency. And without having that, you're not going to know how to effectively navigate your career path if you're waiting for someone to approach you. So then fast forwarding, once I did that manager role, I realized, the grass is not always greener on the other side. Yes, you have the salary and etc. But whenever it goes from two people managing a department to one person having to do multiple things, it can become very stressful. And if you don't pay attention to your internal signs, externally, you may not be performing because you may have that period of burnout or etc. So that led me to just open my horizons and say, you know what? I want to work for a big company that has international ties, and I want the capability to travel. So that's whenever I began to look outside of the company, and that's how I landed a Fortune 500 job with the big oil and gas company. And I'm not going to
so you went still in oil and gas. You just moved
still in oil and gas because I was like, okay, this could be an easy delineation because by that point, I was already working for that smaller company for 4.5 years. So it would be hard to make a switch to go back into medical since I already had that stint on my resume, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I had 3 job offers, Matt, for oil and gas for Fortune 500 companies. And, 2 of them had amazing salaries. And, I'm young at the time, so I wanted to be where the money resides, where the money resides. But then I prayed about it and I asked my parents, because it's always good to ask people who are older than you for wisdom, because they've been where you are and have surpassed. And not everyone's advice is going to be good, but you could take the advice and the feedback and pick apart what applies to you and work on it. Mm-hmm. So out of this, I ended up taking the lowest paying salary, but that company that I ended up working for was branded by association. They had longevity. At the time, they were on the S&P 500, and they were one of the few companies in oil and gas that still had a pension. And for those of you listening in, a lot of companies don't have pensions anymore. They only have a 401k. So not only was I getting a win by having a 401k and a pension, which is free money that the company is paying to you once you're vested. And vested means you're with a company for a certain amount of time. Then you get those perks. So I factored that in on the back end, even though on the front end the salary was low. But the big slap in the face, y'all, that came was me having to start all the way over and be an administrative assistant, which is at the bottom of the total. So I was like, okay, this is not pushing paper like the other job, but it's like managing calendars, booking meetings and stuff like that. But then I was like, how can you learn value from there? You have to get in somewhere, right? So I took it so I could get my foot in the door with this Fortune 500 company. Then I remained in that role for 4.5 years. But within that time, Matt, and I'm going to cut out some of the story so I could get to the latter part, but I think it's always important to talk about the back end story because it builds up to where I am now. Yeah, 100%. So within that point, I built a lot of relationships and connections, and those connections allowed me to get my first professional assignment whenever now I'm in college. I'm working full-time during the day and doing school at night. So it's a lot of juggling. During that time, I end up meeting my now husband. So we dated, then he proposed, and then now we're married, and now we're expecting a bundle of joy. And it was hard because you have to make sacrifices for certain things that you want to do and achieve in life. So when I graduated with my degree in supply chain and logistics and technology, and I have double minors in purchasing and organizational leadership and supervision, one of the ladies that I had networked with an extracurricular activity, I believe it was either United Way or Junior Achievement. She remembered meeting me, and she says, I remember you were in that department, but now you have just graduated, and I'm actually working in the chemical plant, but I'm getting ready to retire, so I'm going to put your name in the hat. And I ended up getting her position. So when she retired, I got her position, and I worked in the chemical plant. But there was also things that were going on in the background, and I'm not going to go into that for various reasons. But it was that. You see how the power of networking can give you the leverage that you need in order to move on. Then from that role, I ended up changing because my family dynamics are changing. I'm now married. I don't want to commute 2 hours one way and 2 hours another way because I couldn't even plan my entire wedding. So I was like, my husband did everything except my hair, makeup, and the wedding dress because I couldn't make it to any vendors. So from there, I learned how to really advocate for myself, because if you don't know how to advocate for yourself and speak up, then you're going to remain in a holding pattern. So fast forwarding, my last role with that company, and this is leading up to the book, would be trade regulations and compliance coordination. Matt, you just heard me say what my degree is, right?
Yeah.
So how does trade regulations and compliance partner with that degree, right?
How? Tell us.
It doesn't, because I was like, I'm a supply chain, a logistics person. I don't know anything about trade regulations, sanctions, working with the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, or anything. I went to school for supply chain, how to move raw materials up until final products, how to navigate with logistics and stuff. none of my courses talked about regulations and how to manage government stuff and
Oh.
sanctions and all of that. So that was a stretch opportunity. So I had to learn that. And I tell people,
Hmm.
if you want something bad enough in life, you will make the sacrifices to challenge yourself and push yourself to learn more. Things are not always going to be cookie cutter. It's not going to be always that one size that fits all, because it may not fit you personally or professionally, and that's okay. So what can you do to take the opportunity that you're given and leverage and make it work for you?
That's
So
awesome.
then
Yeah.
I want y'all to think about that, and this is why it's so important to share the story. So then fast forwarding, I did that role from I ended up making the role what it was, stayed in that role for three and a half years, then bam, 2020 happens. The
Hmm.
pandemic. So, in the pandemic, oil and gas was not doing good. We all know that the market went to a negative 37%. And, we found out that this particular company was going to lay off over 1,900 employees.
Wow.
I was in that layoff, y'all.
Oh.
There was two types, voluntary or involuntary. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. I'm like, I'm working in global supply chain. I have a supply chain degree, but I'm just in a specialized unit, which is trade regulations and compliance. So that's when I learned that life happens to you, but it also happens for you. But I was already frustrated. But sometimes when you're frustrated, you don't want to move because the money is good, or you're hanging on to that complacency. But sometimes when life happens to you, it forces you and catapults you to that next season if you're not ready to make a move on your own. So hence the book,
The book.
Chocolate Drop in Corporate America, From the Pit to the Palace. And I'm going to pause here, Matt, because I want you to really analyze and be truthful here. When you see this cover of the book, what comes to your mind?
Uh, a lot more white people.
Okay. Okay. What else? Dig deep. Dig deep.
Uh, Professionals, people in corporate America. Somebody wearing a hard hat. I'm looking close now. I don't know. You tell me.
Okay. So I'm going to
We have
hold it
a
up and we're.
person in a red shirt back there. Maybe I'm not. Well, there's a world in the background, I think.
Yes, there's a world in the background right here. You've pointed out the guy with the hard hat. You've talked
Mm-hmm.
about the professional. So let's dissect it here. So when we think about issues in America, do people around the world not face those same issues, even though they may be in a different region, a different race, a different culture? Think about that. On the cover here, you see more people that are outside of the African American race. Since I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned I was in oil and gas is primarily a male dominated field, and you see older white or Caucasian males, however you want to identify them, to be politically correct. But here on this cover, I wanted to showcase that there's diversity. There's someone in the medical industry, there's someone in construction, there's an architect, there's different people from various industries, which makes up diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Because even though you may be in one industry, never think that somebody else in another industry may not be going through what you're going through.
Mm.
Then the title, Chocolate Drop in Corporate America. What color am I? From the outside, I am brown. Some people say black, and I'm like, no, the color of my hair is black. My skin is brown. That's the funny thing. And I say, I like to say chocolate drop because it's fun. I don't want you to say black or African American because you don't necessarily know my background. I am multicultural. My mom is West Indian, she's Caribbean, and my dad is also, some people will say South American or Caribbean. He's from Curacao, which is off the tip of Venezuela, part of the ABC
Mm.
Islands, and he passed almost 2 years now. And then from the pit to the palace, sometimes we have to go through those pits, which are those dark seasons, in order to reach our palace. Your palace, Matt, is going to look different than my palace because your palace is tied to your mission, your purpose, and your success. Success for Matt is going to be totally different than success for Genesis. But are we both not successful? So if you think about it that way and you really dissect the cover of the book, then you will know that it's not just about Blacks in corporate America, but that's the title of the book, and it's all of us working together in order to push the narrative for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And how the book was birthed was out of frustration, because had I not gone through various trials and tribulations working for this particular Fortune 500 company, facing microaggressions, feeling inadequate, being held in positions longer than I was supposed to because somebody didn't necessarily know me, and there were other factors, that is all in the book. Because in that last role, I was underpaid. So my colleagues started at a CL 22 and above, and I didn't realize that until I led a global trade regulations meeting where I was the host. And when they put that on the screen, I saw that my ranking was not on there. I was a CL 15 at that time. And it wasn't until after the George Floyd incident, whenever the vice president decided to put all of us that looked like me in a room to ask what our stance was with personal or professional racism. And I shared 2 personal stories and I shared 1 professional story. 1 week to the date of that meeting, I get a phone call. Ring! I pick it up, and then I'm told that I was going to be given a $20,000 salary increase and a bump in my classification level from a 15 to a 22.
Wow.
So think about that, y'all. So were they doing it to save face? Were they doing it because it's what I deserve? Or were they doing it to cover their tracks because they saw that a lot of companies were being investigated to see how they were measuring up with their diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging programs? Think about that. I'm grateful for the salary increase, but fast forwarding a few months later, I told y'all I got laid off. I ended up getting laid off. So did I get laid off because really I wasn't a good fit for the puzzle, even though I had a supply chain degree working in global supply chain? Or did I get laid off because I ruffled some feathers by speaking up in a vice president's meeting and I had no idea that HR was in the room at the time? But you asked me a question. I didn't voluntarily state what was going on, because other people volunteered and shared their stories. But when you saw I wasn't speaking up, you asked me what my story was, and I told you my 2 stories. And I got rewarded, but then on the back end, it felt like I didn't get rewarded because I got laid off. But it was in that laid off that pushed me and catapulted me to podcasting, to talk more about my book. Talking about my book was a conduit that opened doors and avenue for different people to reach out to me. Now today, I'm coaching other people on how to navigate their careers. I'm talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, not just based on my personal experiences, but based on my family experiences. Having siblings who are married to people outside of the Black and African American community and merging, I tell people it's like we're the United Nations. So when you can link arms with somebody that doesn't look like you and you can focus on the similarities versus the differences, then you really see how you are a part of the equation when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. I'm going to pause there, Matt, because I want you to interject, because I've unloaded a lot, but I've also took some pauses in there.
Well, I listen to podcasts a lot myself, and I always sometimes you hear or you read the comment section. It's like, I really like this host because they let them speak. They're not trying to interrupt them that much. And you were doing such an amazing job telling your story, and I didn't have much to interject, although I've taken some notes over here. But yeah, so one of the things that I normally do, now it's amazing. You got an amazing story, and actually your experiences, obviously you're not alone in those experiences, and there's so many people that need to learn more and get help in those areas. But circling back, one of the things I like to, before we talk more about the book and stuff, my curiosity always lies in, your drive a little bit? Because in some of the things you talked about, it seemed natural for you, like networking and having that drive to want to learn, to be willing to learn and keep going no matter what's thrown at you. You're going to overcome, and you're going to. Where do you think you get that from? Is there somebody in your life that's influenced you, maybe family, or just how you were brought up? What do you think is really contributed to that?
I would definitely say one of the big influences in my life was my dad. And my dad passed in November of 2020. So the day before Thanksgiving, November 25th. And him and my mom were married for about 30 years up until my dad passed. And my dad passed in a non-conventional way. My dad passed from medical negligence, and it was very unexpected. So while I was going through this journey at work in my personal life, not just, being a young woman who's now married, I also became a caregiver for my father, and having to see my father go through his transition from, walking into the hospital to 3 days later, he becomes paralyzed from the waist down from medical negligence. And I'm like, how does that happen? And I'm not going to share everything, but it was like I was juggling. So whenever that happened to my dad, it really crushed me. But then I always remembered as a kid growing up, my dad always instilled in me that you're awesome, you're great. God created you for a purpose. You can do it. And he spoke life into me. And my mom, she nurtured me in a different way than my father, but I grew up in a very loving home. And my parents always instilled in me that life isn't going to be easy, but you have to control what you can control and don't worry about the things that you can't control. And sometimes I still struggle with that because, I always wanted to do things right. And whenever you want to do things right, it's that people pleaser comes in. But then you have to realize that, am I trying to please other people or am I trying to please myself? Because if you're looking to please everybody, then you're always seeking validations from other people who were never meant to appease you or validate your journey. And I think now we hear the big words imposter syndrome nowadays, or we hear narcissist or etc. So you fall into those traps, but I would say just going back to the foundation and building upon the foundation that my parents instilled in me helped me become the woman that I am today, because I took some of the amazing qualities that my dad instilled in me, and I took the amazing qualities that my mother instilled in me, especially being from two different places and coming from a background that was not an American type of background, but they came to America to make a better way for their children. And then I look at my older siblings. So I have two older brothers and two older sisters, and I'm the baby, and we're a blended family. So looking at their lives and getting glimpses and etc. gave me, an advantage, because by that point there's a big age gap. Me and my oldest brother are 13 years apart. Me and my other brother are 11 years apart. My sister and I are 4 years apart, and me and my other sister are 2 years apart. But each one of them had each other. So it was like, in a sense, it felt like I was an only child growing up. So it's like, okay, let me grab a little bit over here, grab a little bit over there, and then let me be me. And of course, yes, I had slips and bumps along the way, but having different influences around me also helped shape me. And I took what applied to me and built upon it, and what didn't apply to me, I discarded it and I made my own path. So I hope that answers your question, because it was different areas that allowed me to be multifaceted and multidimensional in order for the inspiration and the drive to come.
Yeah, I mean, I always find that part of the story. It's an important part of the story, because a lot of people are handed the same light, the same kind of path. You can put them in the same place, the same situation or career path or whatever, but some do better than others based on their support systems, how they were brought up, the values that were instilled in them, and all that stuff. So, and certainly family helps. It helps having grown up in a home like that, with that kind of support and guidance and good role models and all that good stuff. So,
Yeah.
So, so do you regret not? I know we always want to say there's no regrets. Everything's made us who we are today. But do you regret not doing more in the medical field or going in that direction, or are you happy you landed where you landed?
So I have a bit of regret in a sense, and I'm going to say yes and no. I'm going to give you two answers. Yes, some of the regret came, especially when my father was going through medical negligence, because I didn't necessarily have all the business acumen and the terminology to really advocate for my dad. But on the pro side, one of my sister-in-laws is a nurse practitioner, so she helped me a lot navigate some of the things that my dad was going through, even though she worked in a different discipline. And it's funny that I'm actually saying that. Her specialty is oncology, so cancer. And I remember me working in the cancer industry, even though
Yeah.
my dad did not have cancer, some of the things that you learn going through school and training, you could apply that in different disciplines. So I knew enough, but not enough to like really fully advocate for my dad on my own. So luckily I had that support system there to help me. So the only regret would be like if I would have really went down that path, then I could have, really advocate for my dad. But the thing is, who's to say that that would have happened to my dad? Because we don't know. No one knew the pandemic was going to happen. I really feel like the pandemic is what caused a lot of medical negligence because the hospitals were overstaffed with patients and understaffed with physicians, doctors, CNAs, and etc. So some neglect and negligence took place, and that's me personally. And then I've had on my show a few doctors that coincided with my sentiment to say yes, when the pandemic was like in the upswing of things, we were forced to the brim and we didn't have enough manpower.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
My wife is in the medical field. She's a nurse. And so and we've been together she's been a nurse ever since I've been with her 20 plus years. And I hear about all of that. And yet, it was rough, especially in the beginning. Everyone was stretched. Everyone was freaking out, didn't know what's going on, what to do. And I live here in Milwaukee, so it was insane. But yeah, it's tough. And so even when things are normal, still I hear maybe stories about negligence and stuff, or just people not doing good jobs. There's a lot to be said there, but
yeah.
yeah, it's too bad, and I'm sorry to hear your dad had to go through all that, but at the same time, thinking about how your life went and how you ended up not doing that, maybe it was for the best. You never know. You could be like my wife actually regrets sometimes getting into the nursing field. She's not super happy with the field, but she's doing well and she's day by day. But maybe that there should have been a different path for her or whatever. Yeah. So back to, the other thing that kind of really strikes me, to kind of pivot a little bit again, with your story is talking about diversity and all the challenges you went through and stuff. And I've been hearing this more and more, I've even having more female entrepreneurs on the show and stuff and things they've gone through, whether that's, I had somebody in my last show, she was like talking about how she wasn't, things she was doing, she wasn't taken seriously, or people were trying to take advantage of her because she's a woman. Other sexual related stuff from previous ones, where somebody in a higher position putting their hand on her, while they're in the car and all this stuff that happens. And for me, like, especially in recent years, because of everything that's been going on and stuff, like, I feel like I live in a bubble a bit. Because I haven't really worked in corporate America. I'm kind of a introvert, so I don't get out much these days. I mean, I've had a full life, but, and so a lot of things like that are just shocking to me. And it's almost, especially in recent years, it's like, it took me a minute to really listen and like, this is actually, a lot of this is still happening. And like, and how are people even getting away with treating people the way they treat people and all that stuff? And so the fact that, and I've never talked about this on the podcast, never had anybody wrote a book about this type of stuff. So that's something I want to, I don't know if you have any more to say on that and stuff, but it's, like I said, I feel like, like I've gone through my life, and I don't, and probably because I'm in a privileged position or whatever, I'm just a normal white male going through life. I don't wake up and think about that every day. I grew up in a non-diverse world, grew up in a small town. But I moved to Milwaukee when I was young. I'm 51 now. When I was around 19, I've been here. So a lot more diversity here, and I've built teams, diverse teams. I've worked in the inner city. I've been around everybody, right? Mm-hmm. Even through that though, like I still like all the stuff that's happened in recent years. I'm struck by it because I didn't realize and so that is from my personal experience, like the eye-opening part of this. I love that you're eating. What are you eating?
Waffles.
Waffles? I had waffles today. So that's, I don't know where I'm going with that, but if you want to speak, kind of more to that, is that kind of from your experience, how pervasive it is. You've been in the corporate world. You've seen all that stuff. I mean, this is something that's still happening and that people need a lot of help with and guidance through, in terms of diversity and stuff. And people like me that, obviously don't get out much and realize what's all happening in the world. Can you speak more to that?
Yeah, I definitely want to cover more grounds here. So I guess let me just share more insight to my background. So my grandmother, so my dad's mom, was actually half black, half white. And of course she was a foreigner as well. And then I told you early on that my mother is West Indian, so she's Caribbean descent, and my father is also Caribbean, South American descent, just depending on how you look at it geographically. And, we have like a multicultural family. So my sister's kids are half white. My brother's kids are Indian, half Indian descent. And my other brother, his daughter's truly African American. So her mother is from Cameroon. So for those of you listening, Cameroon is in Africa, close to Nigeria. So there's definitely that diversity there, based on cultural backgrounds within my family. And then with me, just growing up, the way I sound and talk on the phone, some people, whenever they meet me in person, they're like, oh, you're black. Because some people growing up, they would call me an Oreo, like you're black on the outside, but white on the inside. So I was teased and bullied. Or they're like, oh, you don't sound like a black person. And I'm like, how is a black person supposed to sound? I'm sorry that my parents put me in a area which was very educational, because my mom grew up under the British system and my father grew up under the Dutch system, and my father spoke 4 languages. And just growing up, going to school, like when I took Spanish, for example, some of the Hispanic kids or the Latin kids, some of them got upset that I was making an A in Spanish, but it's not up to me to tell them that my dad speaks Spanish fluently and he's helping me at home. And so one day the teacher asked to meet my dad. I was like, oh, here we go again. And when my dad came to school, they're like, oh my gosh. And then they gravitated to my dad. They wanted him to come in and all of this stuff. But what goes on in my household is my household. And it goes to show you can't just judge a book by its cover. Just because a person looks a certain way or they talk a certain way, that doesn't make up who that individual is. And I feel it's based on societal norms nowadays, because society likes to put people in a box. And when you put people in a box, it's like you're checking a box to show, oh, we're diverse, we're equitable, we're inclusive, or we have a belonging. But when you go beyond the surface level and you actually get to know who that individual is and their background, then it opens your outlet. Or something I would say is, for example, whenever the Black Matters movement, and this is not to be political because I'm not really a political person, when that happened, people were like, oh, I didn't know racism exists. And I was like, racism does exist. It just was a weird because this gentleman by the name of George Floyd actually got killed on national TV, and it was worldwide. Then fast forwarding, when the pandemic started, what movement came out? The Stop Asian Hate, because people were blaming people from China for the pandemic. They were spitting on them, and then they took it big and blamed Asians as a whole. So that's another thing. That's okay, society caused that, but can you really pinpoint where the COVID came from? And then another thing I want to say too is, you mentioned being a white man of privilege growing up in Milwaukee. I grew up in Texas. Texas is very conservative, not to be political. It's also a red state, and etc. And there are certain places in Texas that someone who looks like me should not go to based on certain things that have happened in history. But if we keep allowing certain things like that to happen, are we just repeating history, or are we actually going to do something about it? Because then fear begins to creep in, and then you're conditioning people that this type of behavior is acceptable, and we're condoning that type of behavior. But if you really want to do a better job when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and we all are given our own brain, and we all should know right from wrong, then the minute you see something that is not fair or etc., and you as a white male, Matt, you should act as an ally and say, I don't condone the behavior, or I don't condone what you're doing, because then you become an ally for someone that does not necessarily look like you, but you're doing it on the mere instincts of being humane. And let's put humane back into humanity and start treating people as human beings, no matter what they look like or where they came from. Because don't we all have the same organs inside of us? If you get cut, Matt, you bleed red. If I get cut, I bleed red. So the only thing that makes us different is our hair texture, the color of our skin, maybe our diction, our tonality, and etc. But when you look at racial groups as a whole, we need to stop marginalizing things, because sometimes people see, oh, that black person, oh, they're a gangbanger, they're a thief, they're a murderer, or whatnot. But that's not everyone in the black or African American community. Or like some people say, oh, that white person is trailer trash or whatnot. Not all white people grew up living in a trailer. So why are you trying to use that to identify that? Or Hispanics or Latin people, they say, oh, they just want to cut the grass or come here or whatever. You hear all these forms of microaggressions and these statements that's not true for everyone within that racial group. So why are we holding those statements and continuing to use them over and over? When you hear stuff like that, it hurts, because it's not true. Yes, some people in that racial group may do that, but that's not the entire racial group or the entire population. So why can't we open up our horizons and make decisions for ourselves instead of trying to make preconceived judgments, notions, and assumptions? And we all know what happens when we make an assumption. It makes an ass out of you and I, because you're basing things based on a hypothesis or something that you have formulated in your mind that may or may not be correct. And it can be a product of your environment, how you were raised, and who raised you. Who's to say that they had all the answers? Times have changed. Seasons have changed. People have evolved. Why can't we as individuals begin to evolve and say, yes, this is what was taught to me, but is this really true? Is this factual? And etc.
Yeah. So, yeah. And I think, again, kind of thinking about how I grew up and all this stuff, like we didn't talk about race and stuff because it wasn't a thing. So like, and maybe people did, and I just didn't know, or I just was oblivious. But so when I got older and I moved to Milwaukee, and like I didn't have any baseline, like I didn't have any negative influences in that regard. So it's just, I love diversity. I love being around everybody. And even not to digress too much, but like when I was 20 years ago, I had a little construction company, a little painting and repair business here in Milwaukee. And my crew was black. We had, because I worked a lot in the inner city, that just kind of happened that way, I guess. I had one white guy. He was a carpenter. But I had the most fun with that crew. And we'd go down and it'd meet me at my house every day, and we'd hop in the truck and we'd go down. We just had a blast. I just loved learning about their culture. They actually probably were more worried about me being down there than I was. I was just oblivious. I'm just down there having to, trying to get work done and stuff. I had ladders stolen. I'd have because I worked for, black property owners and stuff like that as well. And they try to help me get my ladders back, or they, try to through their networks. I had great experiences down there though. And so my positive experiences in my life, I understand that they're unique though, and there's a lot of bad stuff. And one of the things you hit on is, I don't know if you said it this way, but it was like the intention, like everything that happened the last couple of years, and how, why did they give you that raise? Was it just the save face? Are they really changing their minds? And because you can see a lot of people doing things, but are they doing it for the right reasons? Did they really learn that lesson, or are they really listening, or are they just trying to save their business or whatever? And so that's something that really strikes me too, because it's hard to know somebody's intentions. What do you think? So maybe we can leave it at this, and we're kind of already long here at around 45 minutes. But what do you the way forward? I kind of think about this a lot, and see everything that's going on and stuff. Like the way forward, is it what needs to change, or is number one is obviously the conversation has to happen. And we always have to be educating, talking about it. You can't just stop talking about it. You got to keep having these conversations or whatever with this random white guy in Milwaukee. Is it education? What things need to change? Are things going in the right direction, or doesn't, what more can be done, or, to improve the situation and for people to, like the shocking things like you're talking about, there's certain like places you can't be in Texas and stuff. Again, for me, it's like, really? That's still a thing? Like, how do we get past that? What do we need to do?
So from an education standpoint, I would definitely say we need to do a better job at educating people, but then people also need to do a better job of wanting to understand the education that they're receiving. We could give the education, but it's up to that individual to take that education, let it marinate, and apply on it. So because it's two folds here. There's information out there, but if you're not ready and willing to receive that information, then it shows that you're not ready to be a part of the solution. You still want to be problematic. The other thing I would say is engage in conversations. You may not always know what to say, but let that person on the receiving end say, I may not understand where you're coming from. I can't, say I know what it feels like because I haven't had the same experiences, but I am here to listen. I'm here to be empathetic, and then also just be a human and connect my human instincts to be a part of humanity. Like, I don't always know what to say with someone that may not look like me, but as long as I'm listening, and then I put a disclaimer, and then I could ask questions, because then they see that you're genuinely trying to be a part of the solution. You're asking questions to learn more, so that's taking away the assumptions or any preconceived judgments or notions that you may have. You're also engaging in a difficult conversation, because they're not always easy conversations to have. But instead of making it difficult, just say, oh, I just kind of want to engage in a courageous conversation, because it does take courage to ignite and spark up a conversation on hard subject matters. But it's because you care and you want to do a better job, because you don't have all the answers and they may not have all the answers. But if you could take what they have and what you have and blend it and meet each other where they're at, I think that can definitely help. Just like you said, you're a white guy from Milwaukee. Like, someone may resonate with you and someone may not. But like I said, you You may be somebody's cup of tea, but you're not everyone's cup of tea. Another thing that I would do is challenge yourself to learn more personally and professionally, and how can you apply that, whether you're working for somebody or whether you're in an entrepreneurial journey. Always look for ways that you can have that application process so you can learn and grow. It's not always going to be easy, but when you get over those hurdles, then you're going to start to see that the finish line is just up ahead. And when you get to that finish line, there's always going to be another race for you to start. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And as long as you're living and breathing, there's something you can always learn and grow from. Another tip that I would say, I can't give away all my tips, y'all. You'll have to pay me if you want to be coached. Another tip that I would say is always ask yourself, like, do that self inventory and say, is it me? And am I thinking about this from a holistic viewpoint, or am I thinking about this from a viewpoint that is skewed by what I was taught growing up? Because some people have remnants of childhood that has carried over with them into adulthood. Am I thinking about this based on my personal feelings and experiences, and I may have some resentment or some animosity based on what has happened to me personally, that it's causing me to have a tainted vision, and then I'm lashing out and I'm not really being open to receive information, because that does happen to people where they allow their personal experiences to affect how they relate to somebody else when that person doesn't even know you from Adam and Eve, and you're projecting onto that person. Another thing that I would say is there's lots of books and resources and etc. out there, which goes back to that education piece. Read that, but then also ask yourself, the sources that I'm getting this from, is it credible or is it biased? Because people put things out and it's biased. So always take things with a grain of salt, and always do your due diligence, your research, and etc. And if you're still struggling, connect with somebody and just say, hey, I'm interested in learning more on this subject. Based on what I've seen about you, it seems like you have expertise in this area. Do you think that we could have a virtual coffee or tea chat, or would you like to go to lunch or whatnot? And if they see that you're coming from a place where you actually want to learn so you could do a better job in the movement, they're going to be open to that. So those are some tips I would say. Does that answer your question, Matt?
I think so. So if somebody wants to learn more about this stuff, and they, obviously you're coaching. Well, I wanted to dig more a little bit into your business, a little bit more in your coach. We'll have to do that another time. But you do coaching, and you have a book. And how in what ways can you help people? That's right. And what ways can you help people with your coaching and stuff? Who's a good fit for what you do for a living?
So my ideal avatar would be someone that is interested in overcoming some of their mindset issues and overcoming some of those paradigms, whether it's limiting beliefs, if they feel stuck, whether you're in that corporate job and you want to make a transition into the entrepreneurial journey, or you just feel stuck in life overall and you just need somebody that will partner with you to, not always sugarcoat stuff, but push you so you could excel to the next level. Because working with me, I'm going to challenge you, but it is a partnership. I could give you the resources, but it's up to you to take the resources that I give you and apply it in order for you to see the results. Because I'm not just going to spoon feed you or handhold you, because that's not going to help you bust a move and take actions. You have to be willing to go out there and put in that work. So if you're that type of person and you're trying to level up in all areas of your life, I'm that coach. And I may not be a coach for everybody, but I'm somebody's coach that's willing to put in that work and get that home run, because I'm all about that.
That's perfect. Good. That's a good note to end on. Awesome. Well, it was a real pleasure having you today. I hope you'll come back sometime. We got probably a ton of other stuff we could talk about. You have a good rest of your day.
Hey, Matt,
And
I just want to plug
well,
my website really quick.
oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So, for those of you listening or watching, my website is actually my name. So, it's genesisamarisKemp.net, and you'll find all the things that I have going on. And then, if you're on a social media platform, I'm primarily on Instagram and Facebook at Genesis Amaris Kemp. And every now and then, I'll tweet. So, it's Genesis A Kemp. But all of my info is on my website.
I need to like create a bullet list or something so I make sure, or like a little checklist at the end. And did I do everything I need to do here? Because I always forget. I get excited and I'm just an awkward closer, I guess. Anyway, again, great having you, and great having you all join us, Builders Crew out there. Until next time.
That's all for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, please subscribe if you haven't already and give us a thumbs up if we deserve it. If you want to comment on this episode's page, provide me with requests on topics for future episodes, or inquire about being a guest, please find your way to thebuilders.fm. You can contact me there or add a comment under these show notes. Now a word from our sponsor, my agency, Unified Web Design. We build custom websites, features, we maintain websites, we work with agencies to fulfill their web design and development needs, and more. If you're interested in our services or are looking for an agency to work with as a partner to build awesome sites for your clients, feel free to reach out to me at unifiedwebdesign.com. There's a handy contact me link at the top. Fill out that form and it will open a ticket, and that ticket will find its way to me. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you next time.